Hi guys, it's James from the Lore Masters, and we are back with our final set review, and we are going through all of the steel cards. So like the others, there's 34 in total. How it works is I go through one by one. We talk about whether the card is good, whether we talk about whether it's bad, whether it's competitively viable, or whether it's not. So let's jump into it. So first of all, we've got 2-drop Aladdin. He's inkable with 2 power, 1 toughness and 2 lore points with no ability. So it's nice that this card has 2 lore points. It works with the 7-drop Aladdin if you did want to shift into it, so you could play Steel Ruby. Got a nice little kind of control deck there if you really wanted to play it. But other than that, there's not too much to say about this one, so let's move on. So you've got Beast Hard-Headed, so he's a 5-drop inkable 4/4 with 2 lore points. When you play this character, you may banish chosen item. So very handy to have item removal on a body. This card is only as good as the meta really, so if there is a loss of item cards in your local meta or you're expecting heavy item-based strategies, then definitely use a couple of copies of this card. If we do get a sideboard, then chances are you're going to be playing multiple copies of this just to bring in for games 2, possibly 3. But yeah, very solid card, very good stat line as well. Even if they aren't playing items, you can just play it as a 5-drop 4/4 with 2 lore points, and yeah, no, he's good. I'd recommend playing this over some of the more other item removal cards anyway. Okay, so 4-drop Captain Hook, Captain of the Jolly Roger. So he's a 4-drop uninkable, 3 attack, 4 toughness. When you play this character, you may return an action card named Fire the Cannons from your discard to your hand. He also has 1 lore point. When the game first got revealed, this was one of my favourite cards to use. He was in at 4 copies into my deck, but as time kind of went on, he got reduced to 2 copies. And then as the full set got revealed, I completely dropped him together with Fire the Cannons, because Fire the Cannons is only as good as the meta allows. So if there's lots of little kind of characters that people are using, then Fire the Cannons is decent. If people are using kind of more mid-range decks, then not so much. Nowadays I kind of opt for just playing more copies of Grab Your Sword, just because it affects the whole board instead. But if you're finding that your meta has lots of little kind of characters, especially ones that gain lore very quickly, then do consider kind of playing 4 copies of Fire the Cannons and a couple of copies of this guy. So bear in mind that you do need to see Fire the Cannons first and actually put it into the discard for this guy to be live. So a lot of the times when I was using him, I would draw him without Fire the Cannons and he felt pretty bad to play. Okay, so here's 1-drop Hook, 1 power, 2 toughness with Challenger +2 and 1 lore point. Very nice aggressive card. He is one of the lowest costs to actually go up to 3 attack. So he's quite nice for when you're swinging back at your opponent's stuff. He's not so great on the defense because chances are your opponent can just trade over him and theirs will still live. But yeah, very nice, especially if you can give it Rush, because you can got 3 power when 1-drop with Rush. It's very nice to kind of swing back at your opponent. He can often trade up to larger things. So you got 5-drop uninkable Hook, thinking a happy thought. So 2 power, 5 toughness with shift 3 and Challenger +3. So you can shift this onto the 1-drop Hook that we just saw. He goes to 5 attack when he swings, which is not too bad at all. And has the ability, characters with cost 3 or less can't challenge this character. I've not seen people use him very much, which is a shame because he does seem like he'd be quite decent, especially in the early game, because your opponent won't be able to attack him. But yeah, so far I've not seen him use anything, but perhaps, you know, people will use it in the future. 5-drop Cerberus, he's inkable, he's 5 attack, 6 toughness and 1 lore point. This is probably the best stats for the cost in all of Steel. I do enjoy this card. I use it in Steel Sapphire as a 5-drop to use with a whole new world to sing it, because he's very difficult to remove just because of how big he actually is. He only has 1 lore point, which obviously needed a downside, so he won't be too much questing. But yeah, do recommend using it as a target for both a whole new world and also Let It Go. So you got 4-drop inkable Donald Duck Musketeer. So he's got 2 attack, 5 toughness and bodyguard. And during your turn, your Musketeer characters gain evasive. So obviously that lets the Musketeer characters attack evasive things themselves, which they weren't able to do before. His stat line is quite good, especially when you pump it with the 7-drop Mickey as well. It's nice that these cards are sequentially costed, so you play this on turn 4, you play the Goofy on turn 5, and then the Mickey on turn 6. But Musketeers are just a casual sort of deck. Hopefully they get a bit more support in the future and become competitively viable. So 8-drop Guntu has the ability, characters with cost 2 or less can't challenge your characters, and he's a 6/6 with 2 lore points. This character is really not worth playing, which is a shame because he is a legend. He was one of the first legends to actually be revealed, but his stat line is quite poor for an 8-drop, and his ability is really not that relevant, because at the end of the day, how many cost 2 or less characters are your opponent going to have? So it's just not worth the bother. It's just a shame that it's just a legendary. So you got 1-drop Goons, 2/2 with 1 lore point. As I say in every single video, every colour has got one of these. There's nothing special about them. The only use that they have is probably to play with Stitch, but it is a nice aggressive turn 1 play. But other than that, there's not too much to say. So 4-drop Hands. Stage a Little Accident. Whenever this character quests, you may deal 1 damage to chosen character. He's a 3/3 with 2 lore points. This card very much has a home in Emerald Steel, because you play this on turn 4, you quest, you ping something with 1, and then you play the Emerald Beast on turn 5, which then exerts it, and the beast can run over it if need be. Perhaps it has another home in other steel variants, but I don't think so. I think that just that 1 damage is not relevant enough. Plus the fact that its stat line is not massive for a 4-drop, but 2 lore points is decent. But yeah, I just think he has a home in Emerald Steel, and that's about it at the moment. So you got Hercules. He's a 3-drop bodyguard with 3/3 and 1 lore point. Early in the game, this card was quite decent to protect your weaker sort of characters from being attacked. So I used to use it in Amethyst Steel to protect my Elsa. But at the end of the day, he essentially is just a 3/3 with bodyguard, so there's nothing terrific about him. If you do want to protect your smaller guys, so things like 1-drop Lilo with the 2 lore points, then this card is probably worth it, just to add that little extra protection so your opponent can't challenge them. Now you got Kristoff. He's a 3-drop 3/3 with 2 lore points. Again, every single colour has got one of these, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. You got 6-drop Kronk. So he's a 6/6 with 2 lore points. So very high statted for a 6-drop, and 2 lore points is nice as well. A good thing to kind of ramp into if you're using Sapphire. However, there are kind of better 6-drops that you could be using, especially in Sapphire, things like Robin Hood, or even Tinkerbell. So chances are this card just probably won't make the cut. If you are looking for just a bit of brute power, then I guess he could be used, but it's probably not worth it. 3-drop Lilo, Inkable, 4/2 with 2 lore points. She's a nice aggressively statted card, but unfortunately its toughness lets it down a little bit. No ability as well, so chances are there's probably not much use for this card. It's a cute artwork though, I like it. So Maui, 8-drop, he's an 8/8 with 3 lore points. So if you can ramp into this guy and it sticks, it can be very good, but chances are it probably won't, especially in a competitive metagame where there's lots of removal. I think this card would just be hit by Hades and Let It Go and Dragonfire all day long, so chances are it's probably not worth it. If you are against a deck that doesn't have that option to remove it, then brilliant, but chances are they'll have something to stop this guy from questing, or just lock him down. It's probably not worth the 8 cost at all. So here's the other Musketeer. So 6-drop Mickey Mouse, so he's a 2 power, 7 toughness with bodyguard and 2 lore points, and your other Musketeer characters gain +1 attack. So all part of the Musketeer package, together with Donald and Goofy. Like I said earlier, it is a casual fun deck, make it better in the future, but you know, he's all just part of the trio. He's not too bad, but he's not too amazing either. So 2-drop Eric, he's dashing and brave, 1 power, 3 toughness with Challenger +2. He is a Captain Hook with 1 extra toughness point. He does well in an aggro deck, so probably paired with Amethyst as well, just to use with Elsa, just to exert your opponent's characters and then you attack over them, and preferably your character staying alive and theirs getting killed. But outside of that, he hasn't got a use. But, you know, put him in an aggro deck, he'll find a home. 1-drop Simba, Future King. He's a 1 power, 2 toughness. When you play this character, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card, and 1 lore point. Very, very good card to use in Steel because the filtering is very important. So there's a lot of utility this card can use. So you can play this on turn 1, draw a card, and then discard a Fire the Cannons to put it into your discard for the 4-drop Captain Hook. You can just discard extra uninkable cards. You can discard cards that are a little bit too expensive. It's a nice filter to keep your hand nice and, well, you can get rid of an uninkable card and draw an inkable one, so you can ink this turn. But I do recommend it, just because it does develop and it does sort your hand out. So if you're using some kind of Steel variant, you probably have a home for this card. 7-drop Mufasa. He's got Challenger +4, and during your turn he gains Evasive, 4 power, 6 toughness, and 2 lore points. If you have a lot of Evasive in your local meta, this card is probably worth it. But because he is a 7-drop, he is quite expensive, especially if your opponent then bounces it with something like Genie, which is quite a popular evasive card. So you might want to think twice about this card, especially as, you can just get it hit by removal. I mentioned Let It Go, Hades, because they're all fairly popular choices. But yeah, if this gets hit the turn it comes into, you're going to feel like you've wasted 7 ink. So just kind of bear that in mind when you're choosing to put this in your deck. And you've got a 5-drop uninkable Simba, Rightful Heir. So he's 3 power, 5 toughness. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you gain 1 lore point, and he has 2 lore himself. This is a slightly cheaper Takar, which we will see in a moment, but this is uninkable and it's only got 3 power as well. So chances are it's not going to be defeating many things in combat, and because he only gains 1 lore, he's just vastly inferior to Takar, so it's probably just not worth using, especially as he is uninkable. So you got a 5-drop Starkey, Hook's Henchman. He's a 5 power, 4 toughness, 5-drop. While you have a captain character in play, this character gains 1 lore point. The captain character is in Ruby. You can see it in our Ruby review, but the fact this only goes up to 2 lore is not generally worth it. Plus, Ruby and Steel don't go terrifically well together. Like I said, they could make some kind of control deck, but this card isn't just worth using outside of kind of doing a casual combo with the captain card. But yeah, there's not too much to say on this one. So here's Takar. So he's a 5/5 6-drop inkable. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you gain 2 lore, and he's got 2 lore points as well. So this character is quite handy because it allows you to challenge your opponent's board while also gaining lore points. So it's essentially you're questing at the same time. So you don't have to make the decision between questing and attacking. It has the same kind of purpose. Very, very handy if you can pull it off. Unfortunately, a lot of the times I'm just generally questing with him and he's just a 6-drop with 2 lore points. So he did get cut from my Steel Sapphire list, but if you have a home for him, especially using Scar Mastermind, then go for it. He's a decent card. I like him. Okay, so 6-drop Tinkerbell, Giant Fairy. So she has Shift 4. Whenever you play this character, deal 1 damage to each opposing character. And during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may deal 2 damage to a chosen opposing character. 2 lore points, and she's a 4/5. So, very solid card, one of the best cards in Steel. She combos with Grab Your Sword to do a 3 damage board wipe against your opponent's side. And then when she does defeat something in combat, she can do 2 damage to something. So there is 3-drop Tinkerbell in Steel that you use with this card. So you play that on turn 3, then you can shift this on turn 4. If your opponent is using an aggro deck, then you can generally kind of get rid of a few characters as early as turn 4. Because bear in mind, she can attack if you shift onto the 3-drop Tinkerbell, as long as that 3-drop has been there for a whole turn. So, like I said, that is quite useful as well. When you shift onto the 3-drop Tinkerbell, you can then use this Tinkerbell to sing Grab Your Sword. So that is how you do the 3 damage to all of your opponent's things. So there's a very good anti-aggro tool, stops your opponents in their tracks, and then you've got a Tinkerbell on your board. Speaking of Tinkerbell, here we go. So it's the 3-drop Tinkerbell, Tiny Tactician. So 2 power, 4 toughness, and has the ability, draw a card, then discard a card. You have to exert her to use that, and 1 lore point. She's pretty much in there just to shift onto, but that ability is quite useful if you've got a lot of uninkable cards in your hand, or you're digging for a particular card. It's useful in a pinch. Its stat line is pretty good as well. 4 toughness is quite difficult to get rid of as early as turn 3. But yeah, she's primarily into there, so you can shift onto the giant Tinkerbell on turn 4 and mess with your opponent by using the grab your sword combo, or just by attacking their stuff and clearing out a few things. A Whole New World. So 5-drop uninkable song. So a character costs 5 or more can sing this song for free. Each player discards their hand and draws 7. When I first saw this card, I didn't think too much of it, because I was like, what? Your opponent drawn 7? That's ridiculous. But as I kind of experimented more with it, especially with Belle from Sapphire, it became true that this card is ludicrous. Your whole point is that you ramp up to a 5 cost, so you play either Maleficent Uninvited, or you play Cerberus, or even you could play a 6-drop depending on what your ink level's like. And then at the beginning of your turn, you play A Whole New World, use your character to sing it, you discard your hand, draw 7, and then start playing loads of stuff before your opponent does. And it's all about kind of you putting down your board before your opponent puts down their board, because they have to deal with it then. Also, it allows you to very much aggressively ramp, especially with Belle. You could close to empty hand yourself and then play A Whole New World and draw 7. It means that your ink goes up a lot faster than your opponent, so you're dropping a lot more threats than they are. But yeah, absolutely bonkers card. You should be using it with Belle. You should be using it in kind of any mid-range ramp steel deck, anything like that. But yeah, recommend using it. Very, very good. So you got 2-drop Break. It's an action card, banish chosen item. This is just Beast Hard-Headed without a body, and it's only a 2-drop. But if you're wanting to banish items, you really should be playing Beast Hard-Headed first. You should be maxing out copies of that before you consider this card. But it is kind of nice to have in a pinch, especially if you're facing it against a lot of item-based strategies. So we've got Fire the Cannons, so it goes with the 4-drop Hook. So it's a 1-drop uninkable, deal 2 damage to chosen character. Like I say, this is only as useful as your local meta kind of defines it is. So if they are using lots of small guys, you like little aggro decks, things like that, it is pretty good. So you can continue to pick it up with the 4-drop Hook. But if your meta is all kind of big characters, then chances are this card is probably not going to be very useful. You probably would just want to use Grab Your Sword instead. Speak of the Devil. So 5-drop uninkable song, Grab Your Sword. Character costs 5 or more can sing this song for free. Deal 2 damage to each opposing character. So a very good against aggro in general. Kind of you can board wipe them with the Tinkerbell. Or you could even play a couple of copies of this in one turn if you've got the right situation to do so. But it is your main removal card, so if your big character doesn't quite finish off a character, then you can grab your sword and wipe their board. But it's just generally to keep your opponent from going absolutely wild on their board. But also when you refill their hand with A Whole New World, they're going to put a lot of it down on the board, so you need to be able to deal with it. So you do generally kind of play this with Tinkerbell just to kind of make their board go away. But yeah, very, very good card. You can get a copy of this in the Steel Sapphire starter deck as well, so they're not going to be too difficult to get hold of. So you got Ransack. It's a 2-drop action card. Draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. This, I believe, is supposed to be used with the Tamatoa deck, so you can get items into the discard to use its ability. But it is a -1 in terms of card advantage, so just bear that in mind. So you're going to have to find a combo that you can, essentially get advantage from it. I did mention Tamatoa, but you could use anything as long as you can recur the card back from your discard. So Smash is a 3-drop inkable action card, deal 3 damage to chosen character. So it's quite handy to use in certain strategies. If you did feel that you needed a little bit of extra removal and you wanted it to be inkable, then Smash is a good choice. There's certainly a lot of free toughness characters that you could use against this card, but whether it's worth paying the free ink, I'm not entirely sure. But at least it's inkable, so if it is useless, then you can just ink it and play something else. So Beast's Mirror, so it's a 2-drop inkable item with the ability exert it and pay free ink. If you have no cards in your hand, draw a card. So very handy in a aggro deck once your hand is empty. Very handy in a control deck, because once you eventually run out of cards, you're going to be relying on this. So you're going to have a lot of ink to use, and you're going to be running low on resources, so you can probably find a home with it as well. It's better than Magic Mirror in my opinion because it is inkable, so if you don't need it you can just ink it. But yeah, in generally any kind of steel deck that you see yourself getting low on resources later in the game, it is probably worth an inclusion. So 2-drop Frying Pan. Banish this item, chosen character can't challenge during the next turn. There probably is a use for this card, just to kind of stop your opponent from doing things, maybe together with the 7-drop Mickey Mouse in Emerald, to stop your opponent from questing and stop them from challenging. But it seems kind of very resource intensive to kind of keep picking this up from your discard pile to stop your opponent from doing stuff. Again, you can use it with Tamatoa, because every time it quests you get to pick up an item from your discard, so you could always kind of reuse this by picking this up. Maybe get Maurice to quest as well, which discounts your next item by 2. Play this, draw a card, and then stop them from challenging. It's definitely an option. How good it is, I can't possibly say at this point, but it certainly is an option to try. So 4-drop, uninkable Musketeer Tabard. Whenever one of your characters with Bodyguard is banished, you may draw a card. So it's worth mentioning it doesn't have to be banished by challenge. If it is banished by your opponent using removal on it, then you still get to draw a card. There is a use for this if you did want to play a massive Bodyguard deck, so using every Bodyguard you possibly can. I'll say including the Musketeers as well, because that's what it's designed for. It just keeps your hand, fairly replenished. Not a lot of people are using item removal at the moment, so chances are it will go unanswered on the board. So yeah, it's worth an inclusion if you did want to play a Bodyguard deck. And then you got Plasma Blaster. It's a 3-drop uninkable item. So exert and pay 2 ink, deal 1 damage to chosen character. I suppose if you're finding yourself with a massive excess of ink every single turn, it's not awful. But the fact that it's a 3-drop and the fact it's uninkable is pretty bad. I don't think there's a home for this card yet. Whether it will be viable in the future, I'm not sure. But at the moment, I honestly think this card is just not even worth a consider. Right. That is all of Steel. So I really hope you've enjoyed watching this series and kind of hearing my thoughts on the different cards. So please give us a like, please subscribe as well, because I'm bringing more deck profiles now that the set has been fully revealed, and I'm going to show you some more gameplay, maybe even show you what the Steel Sapphire is like. But yeah, cheers guys, it's been a blast, and I'll see you later.